All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. Today, we're going to be talking about the Industrial Revolution happening in the United States. We're going to talk about the first one that happened. We're going to talk about some inventions that were created and why the South didn't want canals or railroads going through their land. We're going to talk about that today, okay? So let's go look at the objectives. So we're going to analyze the reasoning for southern states to not want railroads. We're going to examine the rise of immigrants coming to the U.S. in the early 1800s, and we're going to create an argument on which invention was more revolutionary. So we're going to go over several of them, and we're going to see if we can have a little discussion, okay, on which one was more significant. Oops, my bad. So here's your warm-up picture. The first question asks you, what two buildings does a train have control over? So if you look in the background, you'll see two buildings, okay? And that should really help you out. Remember, they're both in DC, and they're both important buildings. They basically deal with the government, so that should help you out. The second question asks you, who do you think is going to win? The train or the man with the stick? Which one do you think? And why do you say that one? Okay, so be sure you justify your reasoning. So pause the video, write your response, but we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so here's the thing. In the early 1800s, transportation really started to take off. The thing that really connected these states together now were three things: roads, canals, and railroads. Now, when I say roads, some people typically think, okay, well, weren't there roads before? They did have roads. They had these common paths. There were more paths than they were roads. You know, these buggies and wagons would follow a certain trail that somebody else had done. You know, so after time, the wheel area would get, you could see it from the dirt where the wheels were. You know, but the thing is, there was always like rocks and things in the way. So what roads basically did was they cleared it out, took all the big rocks out of the way, so that they don't break. The wheels won't break on the wagon, things like that. Canals, they allowed boats, not big old giant ones like now we have nowadays, but just smaller ones, to go from one place to another using the tide of a river and things like that. The other one was railroads. Railroads were in its infancy and they started to boom. People realized these railroads, these trains can carry a lot of weight and they can still get some speed on them. So it was really helpful for factories and industry and things like that, as well as people. A train goes a lot faster than a horse can, because again, horse can run fast, but eventually gets tired. Trains, they can keep going. Now, the northern states, so if you look at this map, they really stuck with manufacturing goods, factories, things like that, trying to make things. Whereas the South really just focused on agriculture. What can they grow on the ground? They weren't really particular on creating any type of like stuff through machinery. It was all from the land, okay? Because you have to remember, they have a lot of slaves down there, and they want to get the most out of them, which would again be manual labor. So in 1806, Congress funded the building of a great American, highway. Some politicians basically were thinking, well, can the government do this? Do they have the authority to do this? The Constitution doesn't say that they can. So what happened was some states some local towns and some private businesses were like, wait. You're saying that they're going to be a big major road over here. Well, we'll pitch in money to have a road go from the major road to our city. Yeah, what does it take? We'll do it. We'll pay for it. And that's what happened. A lot of little towns and businesses paid to have roads created so that their little roads connected to the big roads. Okay. So if you look at the map, if you look at the north, there's a lot of canals, roads, and trains. In the south, you really don't see too much. So here's your first question. Why would it be beneficial for states, local towns, and private businesses to invest in roads? What do they gain out of it? So think of it like where you're at. Let's say there's a town in your neighborhood, and the next big giant road is 2-3 miles away. How would your town benefit if you guys had one road that connected to the main road, to the big road? How would your little town benefit? Now again, remember, you have to remember at this time, the towns aren't that big. There's a lot of empty space in between. So why would it be beneficial for a small little town to have a road connect to the big road? Okay, so pause the video, write your response. But we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. So the Industrial Revolution began in Britain in the mid-1700s. It took some time, but eventually got to the U.S. in the beginning part of the 1800s. Now, America realized this. It works best if it has a free enterprise, which means that the product prices and services are determined not by the government, but by the market. And what that means is you, the buyers. You basically decide whether a company lives or dies. And how do you decide that? By you buying their products or not buying their products. So let's say, just for example's sake, let's say the whole country decides, we're not going to drink Coca-Cola anymore. Okay. After a certain amount of time, Coca-Cola is going to freak out. They're going to lose a lot of money, a ton of money. And they'll do what they can to try to get people to buy it, change their logo, change their flavor, whatever it takes. But again, if people say, no, we're tired of it, we don't want it, eventually it will go away because they're not going to make any money. And there is no company who's going to be willing to just throw away their personal wealth into a company that nobody wants. No one's going to buy that product. So there you go. This free enterprise really helped out some businesses, and some people who had ideas and they wanted to get their idea out, but they needed some people who had money to basically help them out. So if you ever seen the show Shark Tank, that's a great example. These guys have an idea, they go to these people who have money, and if the people who have money like it, they try to strike a deal. I'll give you 10% for the next 5 years, things like that. Now, the thing is, a lot of states, they wanted industrialization in their state. They wanted factories. They wanted things built in their state. So what they did is they made it easy for businesses to form in their states. They kind of got rid of some of the paperwork to make it easy for companies to come in or for someone to start a business in their state. So here's your second question. Why do you think states would want new businesses to basically start in their state? Think what a new business brings. Think about people. Think about stuff like the accessibility to whatever is being created. Here in, just example, here in California, we have a lot of fresh fruits, vegetables, things like that, because again, here in the valley, the food is created. Other parts of the world, other parts of our country, people don't have that access. They can't just have a fresh strawberry stand right down the road. That doesn't really happen because again, fresh strawberries may not grow in some states. If it does, it probably doesn't taste good. So why would it be beneficial for states to have new businesses start in their state? Okay, so hopefully that helped out a little bit. Again, think what businesses bring to a town and to a state. All right, so Eli Whitney, he is known for creating the cotton gin, okay, which is awesome, great, nice. We're going to talk about that later on. But the invention I wanted to talk about is one that he doesn't really get credit for. It's the interchangeable parts. Okay, so this basically is like this. Back in the day, if they had a screw, right, for let's say a table or whatever, a chair, the nut that's tightened it, that went with it, it was custom made. So when you got a bolt and you got a screw, they went perfectly together. But let's say the bolt broke or the nut got lost, you could not get another one because again, that one particular nut and that one particular bolt were made specifically for one another. What Eli Whitney did was basically go, all these bolts, why don't we just make them the same? Change the length and things like that, how big, how small, how, long. And let's make the nuts that go with them, let's make a bunch of them so that they always fit with one another. It sounds pretty like simple thinking, but at the time it was revolutionary. No one ever thought about that. So nowadays, let's say you do lose a bolt. You can go to basically any store, Target, Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever, and you can find the bolts you need. They're there. Okay. Other factories that popped up dealt with lumber, shoes, leather, wagons, things like that. They basically improved all those things. One machine really, really helped out in that it didn't make the creation of stuff faster or better. It just made it cheaper. And that's a sewing machine. Before, clothes were done by hand. The women who made clothes, they had to do it by hand and things like that. It took time. But with a sewing machine, they could just and then there you go. So it made expensive clothes cheaper and cheap clothes even cheaper. Okay. The next thing that came out, which changed the game forever when you talk about surviving the winter, it's canned foods. Okay. Canned food, not only just in like silver containers, metal containers, but also pickled canned foods. Because before, again, people would have to rely on whatever food was being around that during that time, during that season. In winter, some people, it was hard, They would have to have something that was dry, like nuts and things like that. Whereas now they have canned foods. They can pickle and can tomatoes. And then when time came during the winter, if they want tomatoes, they could just open the can. Boom, there you go. You have tomatoes. Tomatoes don't grow during the winter time. But because of canned food, now you can have it during that time. Okay. Now, in 1832, Samuel F.B. Morse, he didn't create the telegraph, he just perfected it. Okay. And he developed a code for the telegrams. And it's called Morse code. If you look to the side, you'll see the little letters. Each dot and dash. That's how they did it. The dot was that, and the dash was that. So that if you watch movies and TV shows, you might hear them on this little clicker thing going dee 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 dee. That's what they're doing. They're basically sending a message. It takes a trained ear to hear the dots and dashes and basically go like, that's an A, E, G, D. It takes a trained ear, and it took a lot of practice. Journalists use this to send news from one part of the country to the other side within minutes, where before it would take days to get a letter from one side of our country to the other side. So by 1860, we had over 50,000 miles of telegraph wire connecting one side of our country to the other. All right. So now with the factories in northern America popping up, a lot of immigrants started coming in, right? They see this as a chance to, hey, get a job, things like that. In 1820, New York became the first city to reach 100,000 people. Nowadays, that doesn't seem like too much, but back then, people were like, oh my God, do those people have any room to breathe? I mean, they must be like shoulder to shoulder with one another. Okay. 40 years later, in 1860, 8 more cities had reached 100,000 people. Places like Chicago, Milwaukee, Boston, they reached that 100,000. In the early 1800s, a lot of people seem to assume that the immigrants who came over were Irish. No, they weren't. The number one ethnicity group that came during 1850 to 1860 were Germans. They were number one. Irish were number two. And they came because of the potato blight. Basically, there was a fungus that destroyed the potatoes for years. And a lot of people starved in Ireland. So that's why they came over here to America to get a better life. So as cities grew, the people who owned factories and jobs, so that they knew, well, if there's more people in the city, that means we don't have to pay those people as much. We don't have to pay our workers as high. Because remember, at this time, there's no minimum wage. So when a new group of immigrants would come in, a factory owner could basically go to another worker going, hey, there's a lot of immigrants coming over. Could you do this job you're doing for, instead of me paying you $1, how about you work for 65 cents? Oh, you can't do it? Okay, well, we're going to have to let you go. See you later. And then they'd hire one of these immigrants. If there's someone they say, yeah, these guys need jobs, could you do your job for 60 cents? If the person said, yeah, okay, cool, awesome, keep your job, keep working, but you're going to be docked pay, down to 60 cents. Now, with these immigrants coming in, there were some people who were natural-born citizens who felt things are changing in America. There's so many different languages now, so many different religions, and they felt that the America that they knew was changing, and this scared them. So they decided to form a group. All right, so before we get to the next part, here's my question to you. Why would people be concerned with immigrants coming over? What was, granted, there's different languages, religions, some of that, but why would that scare them? Why do you think that really got under their skin? Why would they be concerned so much with the immigrants coming over? Okay, so write your response, pause the video, but we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so this group became known as the nativism, and they really came out strongly against immigration. They basically said there should be a limit of how many people come in. This was an effort to keep not only foreign-born citizens away, but also to keep Catholics out of political office. Okay, you have to remember, a lot of these immigrants coming in are Catholic. The Germans, the Italians, some French, they are some of them are predominantly Catholic. So to keep them out of office, they're like, let's keep those people from coming into our country. So a lot of nativist people formed a political party called the American Party, but that name didn't really stick, and their other nickname did, which was the Know Nothings. Now, why were they called that? Well, basically, whenever someone questioned them about something that their group may have done, the people in that political party would be like, all they would say is, I don't know nothing. I don't know what you're talking about. I know nothing. I know nothing about that. So they became known as the Know Nothings. Okay. Now, the other thing, too, during this time, people were starting to realize, labor unions, we need them. Unions help get a better pay, better working conditions, and it helps the members. Okay. So if you have a job and you like your 40 hours a week, that's a union thing. If you like overtime, because you get time and a half pay, think a union. Okay, they're the ones who do that kind of stuff. Now, early on, the time we're talking about here, unions had no power. They'd be like, we're going to strike. And the business owners would be like, oh, how cute. You think you can threaten us? Yeah, do what you want. You're not going to hurt us. So some companies refused to bargain with unions, and even some courts in some states saw them as being un-American. They were like, why do you hate America so much? Why are you trying to ruin business? What's wrong with you? And what they're trying to do is make life better for the workers. Okay. All right, so here's your exit ticket. You're going to answer one of these two questions. Of all the inventions and improvements that we talked about, which one do you think really changed the world more? And why do you think that? Okay, so of the ones we talked about, which one do you feel changed the world more? That one, you can answer the bottom part. Why wouldn't southern farmers want wide roads and trains going through their land? So think about it. If you have a road already and people want to widen it, what does that take up? Same thing with railroads. What do railroads take up? What do you need in order to put down a railroad? And think about these southern farmers. What are they using to make money? Okay, so once you've written your response, you're done for this lesson. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something new. You guys, I'll see you later. Take care and you be safe, all right?